By a quick show of hands, how many of you are engineers? Is that pretty much everybody? Wait, okay, let's try this again. How many of you are not engineers? All right, okay, there's still some. Great, and so quick show of hands, how many are Melton Fellows? So we know who's in the room. Okay, the left side, no one on the right side. Great, and how many of you have started a social enterprise? Raise your hand. Speakers don't count. Okay, one in the back, great. How many of you want to start a social enterprise? Okay, a few. How many of you have the idea that you're going to actually start the social enterprise with? Okay, so some who want to start, some who are still looking for an idea, et cetera. Okay, thanks, that helps me understand who you all are. So I'm going to talk to you today briefly for about 20 minutes, and I'm mostly going to just share my story and where I am, what I do, how I got here, how I came up with that idea before I even started something. Because if you asked me 5 years ago if I was going to be an entrepreneur and start a social enterprise, I would have laughed in your face. There's no way I would have wanted to do that. So I live here in Bangalore. I've been here for about 1.5 years. But my journey didn't actually start in India, while I have done a significant amount of work in India. My journey actually started in sub-Saharan Africa. And actually, it started in North Africa first. So this is Africa. Great, Geography 101. So I actually, when I was younger, I didn't want to be a mechanical engineer. I actually didn't want to be an engineer at all. Who wanted to be an engineer when they were a kid? Okay. I feel like when I was growing up, it was not the cool thing to want to be an engineer. But I didn't want to be an engineer. I wanted to be a secret agent or a ninja or somebody that just sort of like snuck around the globe and solved crimes or something. So I thought that the most realistic path for me was to study mechanical engineering because I loved problem solving, I loved doing puzzles, and to study Arabic. So I would go work in the Middle East. So I actually started up in Egypt. And I studied abroad in Egypt during my undergrad, so I studied mechanical engineering at Harvard. Harvard does have a mechanical engineering program, contrary to popular belief, but I spent a lot of time at MIT as a result because Harvard's program is very theoretical. And I actually went to the southern part of Egypt, and one of the first big engineering projects that I had ever really explored was, no, let's go back, there, this. This is actually the Aswan Dam. It is a massive dam. It was built, I actually have no idea when it was built, so I'm going to leave that fact out. My tour guide there, who was a professor at the American University of Cairo, loved this dam. It was this great feat of engineering. Everyone was so proud of it. They could control the water in the river in the River Nile, and everyone loved it. And when I went to this dam, I didn't actually see a great engineering feat. I saw two things. The first thing is that I realized that all of the land that's downstream from where this dam was has just been completely destroyed. It is utterly disgusting because the Nile used to flood, and now when you have a dam, it doesn't flood anymore. And so the environmental integrity of the land has really changed. The second thing that I noticed is that you're actually looking right here. Actually, you're looking downstream, but on the other side, there is a giant lake. When you build a dam, there is a lake. The lake that formed when they built this dam, called Lake Nasser, actually drowned what was formerly the nation of Nubia. It was an extreme cultural heritage site in Egypt. They had to move some monuments that had been there for thousands of years. They had to actually pick them up and relocate them because the dam drowned them out. So I realized that technology can be really powerful, but it can also have the power to destroy the environment and to destroy cultures. And that was something that I wasn't super excited about. So I went from Egypt, and I actually decided that I wasn't going to work in the Middle East. I unfortunately wasn't going to be a secret agent. I will maybe continue to be a ninja in my future life. But I went south, and I went to Ethiopia. And when I finished my undergraduate degree, I was fortunate I got a postgraduate traveling fellowship from Harvard. This is basically where they give you a lump sum of money to do whatever you want for 1 year. And somehow I convinced a whole bunch of old men on the committee that I was going to hitchhike my way from Ethiopia to South Africa overland by myself, and they thought this was a good idea. And I have no idea why, to this day, still why they gave me this fellowship, but I'm really glad they did. So this is what I did. All my friends graduated from Harvard. They went into investment banking. They went into management consulting. And I packed up a backpack with 1 pair of trousers, 5 T-shirts, my rock climbing shoes, and a sleeping bag. And that is what I lived out of for the next 2 years. So I started in Ethiopia. And I worked for an international NGO designing water pumps. So the purpose of this trip was to figure out what type of technology I wanted to work on, which country I wanted to work in, and what type of organization I wanted to work with. So I started in Ethiopia with an international NGO working on water pumps. And this is a picture of one of the water pumps that I worked with. It's a rope and washer pump. It's actually a really old design. Has anybody worked with rope and washer pumps before? Okay. So this design, it's actually been around for quite a while. It's a displacement design, so you're basically like picking up water with this washer and moving it up, so you're getting water out of the ground. Cool design, this is what I worked with. At the bottom of the well, the rope needs to change directions. So my role was to design a direction changer, and one that would not corrode, one that would actually sort of stay there and be long-lasting. So in Ethiopia, there's a lot of clay, so I actually designed products out of clay, and this is an example of one of the direction changers that I made. I learned probably my first lesson about working in different contexts. In Ethiopia, there is a lot of clay, but they're also used for decorative purposes, so all of my direction changers came back like beautifully painted and designed, and then I stuck them at the bottom of a well. So no one ever saw them again. But they were beautiful for 5 minutes. So as I was working with these rope and washer pumps, I would come across many people that was working on these. So this is one. You can see it looks pretty similar to the previous picture. But the main difference is that the one that I showed you before was by the international NGO that I was working with. This rope and washer pump was installed, I believe, by some funding by the World Bank. And the reason that one of my colleagues up there is looking down in this well is because this thing was broken. This thing was installed 15 years before I got there, and it hadn't been working for the last 12. And this was actually a really common occurrence that I saw. So this was sort of starting to see the role that technology was playing in an international development context. So from Ethiopia, I hitched a ride on a truck, and I went south to the border of Kenya. Many of you are from India. Many of you know what Indian roads look like. This is the road that I took in northern Kenya. This is a giant truck. This is how you get from the border of Ethiopia down to Kenya. You hitch a ride on the back of these trucks. There are 2 trucks. I was on a truck that carried grain. I lived on this truck for about 48 hours. Someone that I knew who got a truck the day before me was on a truck that carried cattle. So he lived on that truck for 48 hours. I think I benefited better from this situation. And so I reached Nairobi, approximately there on the map. And I worked on a different project. This time I worked with a small community-based organizations, and they did plastics recycling. This is something that I cared a lot about. I had previously worked in Ghana with a class at MIT on plastics recycling. It's a big problem. As you can see, there's a sign that says no dumping. There is lots of dumping. We see that in a lot of places. I love the juxtaposition of these 2 images. And so the problem is that I care about plastics recycling, but unfortunately most of the rest of the world doesn't. So the question is, how do you get people to care about plastics recycling? And the best thing that we had come up with, or this community-based organization came up with, is you help them make money from free resources. So I worked with a plastics recycling cooperative that collected plastic bags like this, and they sold them to recycling companies, so they were actually making income from nothing. And then I worked with another organization that took the plastic bags and wove them into baskets like this. So this is actually made out of just those plastic bags that you would see on the side of the street. So it was great to work with these organizations, but they were on such a small scale. And still, they had problems getting other people to adopt their different methodologies. So once again, I'm seeing before in Ethiopia, I saw a water pump that was broken. Here, I saw a great methodology that wasn't being adopted at scale. So from Kenya, I went over into Tanzania, and I switched it up again. This time, I worked with bicycle-powered machines. So I worked with an organization called Global Cycle Solutions. What they do is they attach a maize sheller to the back of a bicycle, and instead of shelling maize by hand or by putting it in a bag and like beating it with a stick, which is the traditional method, you can stick it through this device. It looks like this. So it kind of comes in this end, the cob, and then all of the kernels sort of fall out, and the empty cob like shoots out the back. It's got this great sort of wow effect. And so I was working with them with they are a for-profit social enterprise. And their model was that they were going to set up entrepreneurs in villages and drive around from village to village on these bicycles and shell maize. So I'm an entrepreneur, I've got a bicycle, I've got a maize sheller, I bicycle from farm to farm to farm, and I can make my income that way. And it was a great idea, but in practice, it didn't actually work. Because getting someone to be that entrepreneur, getting someone to want to drive around from farm to farm and shell people's maize, they couldn't find those people. It was really challenging. So then I continued south, and I went into Malawi. And I worked also this time with some sort of agricultural tool. This time I worked with a groundnut sheller or peanut sheller. Has anybody seen this technology before? So the one person who keeps raising his hand is my husband in the back, which is completely unfair because he's seen all of this before. So this is a cement peanut sheller. What you do is you actually can make it in villages, and you stick the peanuts in the top right here, and you take this handle right here, and you turn it around like this, and at the bottom, the peanuts and their shells are separated. And it's super easy. It's a lot more efficient than it would be to have to do it by hand. It's a great technology. It was started by an American NGO called the Full Belly Project. And they were going around, and they had lots of funding from the US to go give these peanut shellers away to communities. But the problem is that I was actually doing follow-up research. I was going and seeing what happened to the families after they got the peanut shellers. And most of the peanut shellers that I found looked like this. So I don't know if you can tell, but there's a strange orange thing on the peanut sheller. And there's a piece of sort of wood rod that's sticking out of it. There was lots of other stuff on this peanut sheller that they had to uncover. This peanut sheller had been sitting in this person's shed unused for years. And so the Full Belly Project had all of this funding, they were getting all of this press, but when you actually go to the households who had this peanut sheller, they weren't using it. On the other hand, there was this. This is actually also a peanut sheller. The way it works, since we've got some engineers, is that you stick a rod in this top part here, and there's a shoe. I don't know if you can see it, it's like right here. And as you move the rod back and forth, the shoe swings from side to side, and the same thing happens. The peanuts and the peanut shells separate, and they go through the bottom. This was actually made locally. It was made by a local welder in the community. It wasn't made out of cement, which means it wasn't super heavy, and it wasn't more likely to break. And so why, when this peanut sheller was available in the community, was this international NGO continuously pushing this cement sheller that no one wanted? So in Malawi, I also realized something else. I came across this book by UNICEF called An Appropriate Technology Roundtable Discussion. This is a book. Appropriate technology is a catch-all term that's used to describe many of the technologies that I've worked with, things that are appropriate to communities, things they're trying to help improve village lifestyles. And I'm flipping through this book, and I actually saw the design for that metal peanut sheller. And I saw the design for that rope and washer pump that I worked with in Ethiopia. Anyone want to guess when this book was written? Everyone's too quiet. Okay. It was written April 22nd, 1983. So what that told me is that the designs that are on this that I'm seeing in this book and the products that we're using today are actually quite similar. There's been developments in the IT sector, obviously, since then, but from a mechanical engineering perspective, many of the hardware that we're trying to use to help villages is not new. It's been around for a really long time. And yet, why is it that with all of the products that I've worked with, I never actually saw any of these products reaching people in some sort of sustainable way? You know, there was a broken water pump in Ethiopia. There was plastics recycling methodologies that weren't scaling. There was the failed entrepreneur model in Tanzania. There was the failed groundnut sheller, peanut sheller in Malawi. So at this point, I'm starting to get really disillusioned and really frustrated. And so I continued on to Zambia, where I worked in my final sort of project. And this time I worked with a healthcare technology. I worked with since I like to show roads, this is a road in Zambia during the rainy season. So this actually sets up the context for what I was working with. I was working with a project that helps transport patients down roads like this. And so it was a bicycle ambulance. And what it is it looks like this. You carry a patient, and you get them out to the community. And this is a great technology. I love the concept. But when you actually look closer, this is where this is a bicycle ambulance that I found. You can see that the wheel's all warped. It's actually flat. They had this, the clinic had this, but they weren't actually using it because it was broken. And this was actually a really good state one. The next bicycle ambulance that I found looks like this. And unfortunately, this was the state of almost all of the products that I saw going down through sub-Saharan Africa. That I knew that all of these great products existed, and yet when you actually go to villages, no one has any idea about them. And I realized that people were just designing products in vain. So these are just some of the technologies, and it's not just these products that are having problems, but there's many, many more. There's products that are designed to help warm infants. There's products that are designed to help people cook with less fuel. All of these products share the exact same challenge. When you actually go to villages, no one has any idea about them. There's no sustainable dissemination channels. I don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to skip through a couple of these, but those are just some products that have really failed on a massive scale. So the basic conclusion from my trip was that products do not equal impact. Okay, engineers in the room, I want you to remember this. This is probably one of the most important lessons you will ever do. Just having a product does not mean you're creating impact. And because it's so important, I've written it multiple different ways so that you can understand regardless of what language you speak. Got it? Everyone understood? If you remember nothing else, remember this. So then I started to look at who has actually gotten their products to people, who have reached their people. Coca-Cola has. Coca-Cola's reached absolutely everywhere. And in India specifically, and this is when I sort of transitioned because I had a co-founder that spent a lot of time doing something similar to me, but in South India, you also have the mom and pop shops. And those products are actually reaching everywhere. In India, actually, you have about 15 million mom and pop shops. They account for 90% of retail, 10% of the country's GDP, second biggest employer after agriculture. These people are getting products everywhere. And yet, solar lights, clean cook stoves, those things are not. So at this point, I realized that I needed to start something, something I had never wanted to do ever in my life. And so what I did is I started a company called S-Mart. And so basically what we do is we work with these mom and pop shops who have strong connections to the village households, and they're all over India, and we actually connect them to these socially impactful, life-improving, durable goods. Right now, they're completely disconnected, and we provide the three things that they need to actually bridge this supply chain gap. We don't design products. We source from companies all over India, and we actually get them to people because that is what matters if we want to change lives. So we provide actual marketing of these products. We demonstrate them in villages. We physically move them to villages. So we actually put them on motorbikes and we drive them out to villages. And then we provide after-sales service in case anything breaks. So this is an example, just a quick picture of what one of our shops looks like. It's our physical catalog. You could have a mobile catalog all you want, but people don't trust that when they're going to buy something that is such a large percentage of their income. So they need a physical catalog. There's not enough electricity to power a tablet on a regular basis anyways. So this is one of our shops to show you. And right now we work in Tamil Nadu. We have 6 offices. We have reached about 1,000 mom and pop shops to date. So I need to finish up because I'm pretty sure I'm out of time. But over the past couple of years, have shifted from being an engineer to realizing that engineering is not necessarily the solution and that we need proper dissemination in order for products to create impact. But I've also realized that good distribution is not a replacement for shoddy workmanship and that we actually really need good engineers to design good products. So I want to leave you on a positive note and just give a few sort of conclusions that I've realized from my journeys. And this is a disseminator, since I technically now am a disseminator, tip for actually making products that we can then have be distributed at scale and therefore create impact. First, design for wants and not needs. People need to want your product. Just because you think they need your product doesn't mean they think they need their product. And you want them to want your product so that they actually use it. Second, cheaper is not always better. We sell over 100 different products in our catalog. Within the solar light sector, we have solar lights for 650 rupees, 1,800 rupees, 2,400 rupees. The 2,400 rupee is our best-selling product, not the 650 one. People want value when they're going to spend money on things. They want more bang for their buck, so cheaper is not always better. If you're an engineer, include non-technical design constraints. So what I mean by this is that design for branding, design for marketing, design for packaging, that Cement peanut sheller, that was not designed to be moved through a distribution channel. You can't move that thing. It's heavy, it breaks, and then all of a sudden you have lots of wastage. So when you're designing, don't just think about what your wattage or what your various specs are. Think about what it's going to look like when you actually move this product out there. Build those into your technical design constraints. Build in enough margin. If you're actually going to price these products, you need to be able to have enough to incentivize the entire value chain to want to actually move your products. And finally, design for servicing. As you could see from the example of from the bicycle ambulance all the way to the water pumps, just getting the product to a person is not enough. You need to make sure that you can actually fix it, that you can actually maintain it, that people are going to continue to benefit from these products. So that is basically my journey from a mechanical engineer all the way to starting a social enterprise. I hope for those of you that are starting off that this has been somewhat helpful and that you don't design products that are designed in vain, but rather you can design products that are designed to actually reach people at scale. So I'm going to have to leave before the final question and answer session at the end, but during the coffee break after the next speaker, I'll be in the back and I'd be happy to answer questions. And thank you for listening.